Maybe it's kicking your shoes while you're, yeah, clicking your heels while you're dancing. How's that?
Going to the Boonville brewery and
drinking beer.
And having beer that's illegal.
Cirque the tutors tweet, spied a borp and shied. They tweaked poor Cirque and gormed the borp, and he piked plenty green-eyed.
Boontling is a language that was coined probably around the turn of the last century that has to do with the locals being able to communicate without outsiders knowing what it's about.
You want a couple Boontling words from us. So one of them that we used when the kids were growing up was the words for pancakes and syrup, which is saddle blankets, which are pancakes, and Bill Nunn, which is syrup, named after the man who used to flood his pancakes with syrup.
When I was a kid here in Boonville, I always thought another word for telephone was Bucky Walter, because all the payphones in town said Bucky Walter over them. So I always thought that was just another word for phone. Bucky Walter was the first person in town to have a telephone, so that's what they named it.
Well, I'm Deacon, and that's my boot name, Deacon. Wes Smoot is my name. I acquired the name Deacon when I was in school, and I was always kind of backwards and shy and bashful, and I sat around and looked all the time. And to look in Boontling is to deek. You deek on something, you look at something. So I acquired the name of Deacon. Now the language was developed actually in about 1875, 76, somewhere along in there. And there's two or three stories of the origin of the language. The one that I'm kind of prone to like the best was the fact that there was a little girl in the Bay Area, the San Francisco area, who got the family away without the word clergy, and to save her folks embarrassment down there, they moved her. She had relatives in Bell Valley, which is a little valley on 253, and they moved her up there until after she had the baby, and then she's going to go back to the city. So the women would go out in the daytime and pick hops, and they wanted to talk about this girl going to have this baby, but they didn't want to embarrass the girl, so they started getting some words gathered up. One word meant another one. The women understood it, but the girl didn't understand it. Then the women would go home that night and tell the husbands what they had come up with to talk about this girl with. And the husband thought it was a real good idea, so they went to sheep shearing camps and started using the words too, and the word just escalated out from there. The other story was that the elder people was using words to try to keep the kids from knowing what they're talking about. And of course, in a very few years, the kids was teaching the elder people what it was about. And in the early days, the old bucket of blood, they called it, that was the main bar in town. And they had a bench right outside the bar. And they would sit out there and talk Boontling, you know, and tell bear stories and whatnot. And they'd go home. Well, words in the Boontling language, you don't just go out in the air and pick a word out. It has to have a meaning and a background or something. So one of these old timers would go home. He'd sit and think all week about something to make a word up with, and he'd come up with something. Well, he would come into town maybe Saturday night, and they'd sit around the bar and get about half drunk. And in the course of conversation, he just dropped this word in the conversation, and nobody else would ever ask him what that word meant. They had to go figure it out. And sometimes it'd take quite a little while, but then sooner or later, one of them would figure it out, and then he'd tell another one, and that word became local, part of the language then. The one I added was lightning and thunder. Herkimer, Jeffer, and Barlin. To Jeffer is to fire. Jeff is a fire. And to Barl, that is the sound of a shot echoing across a canyon. And so the lightning was the fire of Jeff, and the Barl was the thunder going across. And then, well, one of the words, as I mentioned earlier, was about in the, I guess in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, the hippies moved in here, and they just about took the place over. And of course they wore just as few clothes as they possibly had to. So one of the famous things around here was some woman would be walking down the street and they'd say, "Hey, deke on that, the old Dame Shider Molly Sling." Well, in Boontling, Muldoons is a Muldoon is great big breasts, and any woman that had big breasts, it was Muldoons. And of course, Molly sling, that's the sling that held the Muldoons up. So these girls, they wouldn't wear no bras, so they shied their Molly sling. But one of the most used words, taboo words in the language, is the word burlap. And
Burlap.
Burlap. That is the most common used word in the language. And how that word came about was years ago there in town they had a feed store. And a couple of old ranchers came to town and they wanted some feed or something. And they went in the store, the proprietor wasn't there. So they waited around and looked around, and finally one of them said to the other, so we'll go back in the back. Maybe he's back there doing something. Well, in those days, burlap sacks came in a bale. They was all baled up, maybe 50 or 100 sacks to the bale. And this fellow went back to the back of the store, and this proprietor had one of the local ladies. He had her over that pile of sacks, and he was doing his regular thing with it, you know. And he come back out, and the other one said, "Did you see anything of him?" And, "Yeah, he's back there burlapping," he said. And that's where the word came from. Ad-lib.
How about ad-libbing a couple of Boontling sentences to me? I'll try to figure out what you're talking about.
The Eildon pike to the Chigglenook, for Gorms, for the Boonville.m4v. When she got there, the nook was strung, and the Boonville.m4v had Nemer.
I haven't a clue.
Jack and Jill went up the hill.
Mother Hubbard.
Oh, Mother Hubbard.
Mother Hubbard went to her cupboard. See, the Eildon pike to the Chigglenook.
Shingle nook is a cupboard.
Cupboard. That's where a lot of people kept their canned goods in the cupboard. See, for Gorms, for the Boonville.m4v, for the ball dog, hairy mouth. The hairy mouth, or Belgiumer, the hare, that was a dog. So she went for Gorms for the Boonville.m4v. Well, the dog was going to get the dog something to eat. But when she got there, the nook was strung. That meant it was empty. The most common used good word in the language is ball. Anything good is ball. That don't make it any better. When it's ball, it's the best there is. That word comes from the old ball brand shoes. Years ago, the shoes had a red ball on the instep of the shoe, and that was the best shoe you get. You couldn't get a better shoe than that. So anything ball that comes from the shoes.
Well, this has been really ball.
Yes, it has. It's been a ball harping session.
It's been a ball harping session. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Cirk, cirk, the tutors tweet, spied a borp and shied. They tweaked poor Cirk and gormed the borp, and he piped plenty green-eyed. And that basically tells the story of poor old Tom Thumb finding a pig, getting beat off of the pig, and chased away while whoever was there took his pig and ate it.